I'm Chris Collinsworth. Be sure to check out the PFF Fantasy Podcast as our experts give you the edge on the waiver wire, start-sit advice, and DFS suggestions. Download and subscribe on iTunes or on your favorite provider.
What is up? Welcome back to Draft Podcast 4.0. I'm Mike Renner, joined as always by Steve Palazzolo. We're here in Indianapolis at the Combine, recording from a hotel room right now. So if the sound quality is not the best, hey, this is all we can do for you this week. But I'm going to get right into it. The question that I know is on everyone's mind right now, Steve, and that's which offensive linemen look the best in their underwear so far? And you can't say yourself.
I have not been running around in my underwear this week, but yeah, we're recording here on Friday morning. The offensive linemen are running around and doing their 40s, the most important stuff, right? Avante Collins. Avante Collins is the guy that's winning so far because he ran like a 4.78 and a 4.82. And of course, you fire up some of the tape and he doesn't look that great, and you fire up the stats and he's given up 33 pressures, but it doesn't matter. He ran really fast and had a good 10-yard split.
No, I loved back when Travis Frederick was a first-round pick and everyone brought up, oh, he was the slowest offensive lineman at the Combine. I don't think it really matters. Well, I think we've seen it doesn't matter.
We talked to Bill Callahan about that last year when we were here at the Combine, actually. I think I remember bringing that up when we were in conversation with him. He was the offensive line coach for Dallas at the time, and he was just saying when he fired off the ball, he was so good. It did, obviously the 5.5 didn't matter, but he has that short area quickness that translates to the zone blocking scheme great. So if you're over there trying to say, well, if a guy runs 4.8, he's going to be a great zone blocking guy. If a guy runs 5.5, he won't. Travis Frederick would be the example of, the opposite, because he's the best zone blocking center in the league.
Yeah, that's not quite how it works. It's more about your ability to be coordinated and do things while you're moving, not so much how fast you can actually move. So
it's like your balance ratio off the ball. I think that's huge.
So huge. So we were talking, though, earlier this week about some theoretical stuff. We did our Combine preview last week, so we're going to get into more, just draft theory here, because not much has happened over the past week to change any of our opinions on stuff for player evaluation. But one thing we were talking about is you were talking about how guys win, are able to win in certain ways. And you were talking about how often is more important than the ability to do it. So two guys can have the ability to do a spin move inside, but it's how often do they actually win that's what matters, not just that ability to do it.
Yeah,
so get into that more for me.
Yeah, so a lot of people will say, we'll use the word traits and say, well, if you show this trait, you've shown the ability to do something, whatever that might be, or, shows the ability to bend the edge. I think this was always one of PFF founder Neil Hornsby's complaints about generic scouting reports when it says, can win on the edge, shows the bend to do this. Mm-hmm. We've always come in and said, well, how often? Does it matter if you can do it? Or how do you compare a guy that can do it versus a guy that also can do it? It's the how often, and how often matters. Yes. How often you win. And this also correlates to the old defensive lineman disappearing. This guy disappears too much during the game. And I feel like that is such a generic statement because, the best defensive linemen only win 10 to 15% of their pass rushes.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of disappearing going on from defensive linemen. So I think the point is the how often is just as important, if not more important than the how. So this guy wins off the edge. This guy wins off the edge, but this guy does it more often, higher percentage, and that's where what we consider production at PFF, I think that's where that value comes in.
I see so many scouting reports on defensive linemen that say things like taken off the ball by double teams. That happens to pretty much everyone in the NFL.
It'll happen. It'll happen at some point.
To David Harrison at some point last season. He was taken off the ball by double teams. So just saying things like that, saying has this ability, that ability, you kind of lose that. You kind of lose the extremes when you just talk in generics on scouting reports like that. You lose like you said, the frequency aspect that everyone, he sometimes gets taken off the ball by double teams. Well, that doesn't tell me, how much different that is compared to everyone else in the class. So I think that what you just said is very important aspect of the scouting. yes, you can have traits, but it's how often do those traits appear and how often, are they going to appear in the NFL? That's what really matters.
And we'll have some of that stuff in our scouting reports. DeForest Buckner last year, we said we'll get blown off the ball on double teams, but that was something that we saw on tape consistently. You saw it over and over and over again. That was a very specific weakness that DeForest Buckner had. I think that's one of those things too. You need to see it. You need to see it often. Everybody's going to get blown off the double team once. I mean, Jonathan Allen got reached by a subpar Kent State guard in a game. So it'd be easy for me to say, can get reached by guards in the game, in the run game. And it's like, it happened pretty much twice all season.
Yeah.
I still ended up having to mention it in the scouting report because we're looking for negatives for Jonathan Allen. But the point is, I think the how often is so important. And that's where we're just sitting there quantifying production. The best players win at a higher rate.
And that kind of goes back to what I was talking about with Sam on the podcast earlier last week, which is basically if you're looking at a 3-game sample size of someone, you're not really determining that how often. You can hit, their best game and think he does it super often, but unless you're going over the course of, 8 to 9 games in a season, you're really not grasping how often a guy does things because of the fluctuation in play, how much guys just differ from game to game. So I think that is also a huge aspect of the how often is getting enough sample size to feel comfortable with a guy, because as we've seen, small sample sizes can be very unpredictive when it comes to NFL success.
I see people all the time say, this guy made great improvement this year from last year. How many games did you watch last year? 2. How many games did you watch this year? 3. So you've watched about 15% of his games last year, 33% of his games this year. I mean, come on, you don't know everything that guy did. And again, I think that's where I like to think that our play-by-play value really comes in, and our ability to just take the graded plays, almost like the action plays that a guy has been involved in, and you could fire through those, and we can actually get through about 12, 13 games of what a guy did in those positive and negative grades and have a really good feel for a guy's skill set. So
because you're still getting
subset scouting is what we call it.
It's still samples. It's still a sample. It's kind of like increasing the sample size without necessarily increasing the time it takes to watch all those plays.
Yeah, exactly. That's what NFL teams are using our stuff for. So instead of watching 4 total games of, say, a defensive lineman, where a lot of times it's like, he's just playing the edge. He's just playing the edge. He's dancing with the offensive tackle. There's a lot of plays that in our world are just zeros, average, expected. But if you take all the positives and negatives over the course of the season, you might get about 200 plays to watch. Mm-hmm. And you can watch 12 games of 200 action plays versus 4 games where you might only get 20 or 25 to watch. So that's all part of the process and streamlining it to try to find a guy's skill set.
Yeah. So we're talking about traits, and another thing we were talking about earlier this week was, like we said, how often those traits show up, but also can those traits change once you get to the NFL?
Oh, man, I don't even understand.
One of the biggest ones I've seen is people, I don't think anyone said during the draft process, Aaron Rodgers has this amazing arm.
Right.
He had a good enough arm. It wasn't anything special. I think everyone right now would agree that Aaron Rodgers is one of the top 5 arms in the NFL in terms of just pure arm talent and what he can do throwing the ball. So that obviously that trait changed. His arm strength changed once you get to the NFL. So if, like you were saying, the traits can change once you get to the NFL, is it really that, again, predictive of NFL success?
This is like the tree in the forest deal. This is so everybody's saying, you got to look at traits. It depends on how you define traits, burst off the edge and wins with his hands, however you define those traits. And so if you're just saying, well, he has the traits in college, therefore those will always be there in the NFL. Even if his production fluctuates, the traits will always be there. Except traits do change. So if they change, why is that? Why is that the basis and the focus of what a guy does in college? And if you define a guy's traits coming out of college, do you even ever reevaluate after year 1, 2, 3, and 4 and just say, well, those are traits. They're always there. Mm-hmm. If they fluctuate, then why do they matter in the first place? So, I don't know. It's just this little philosophical debate where everybody will say it to us because we'll say, oh, this guy wins. He's got a lot of pressures, or he's got, he's got a great grade. And somebody will say, well, he doesn't have traits that translate to the NFL. He's got these traits. But those traits vary sometimes from year to year. And it comes down to the how often. Mm-hmm. The trait of, bending the edge. Does he do that 10 times a year, 20 times a year, 30 times a year? That matters. Yeah. That absolutely matters.
Or is he just ducking under an offensive tackle and doesn't actually have anything else to offer?
Alex McAllister style.
The Alex McAllister. So getting to after we talked about traits that can change, let's talk about traits that shouldn't be able to change, but somehow they continue to, and those are the heights and weights, arm lengths, hand sizes of guys here at the NFL Combine.
I love this.
Again and again, we see guys get measured at the Senior Bowl, get weighed, get their height measured, and then all of a sudden they go to the Combine here and they've grown an inch. They've shrunk an inch.
Guys are training better than ever.
Yeah, their hands are bigger, their arms are longer. We saw Forrest Lamp gain an inch on his arm length. We saw Zay Jones gain an inch of height this year.
Last year was Brandon Allen increased his hand size. And Brandon Allen, his agent specifically got him getting hand massages before the Combine last year.
That's how ridiculous it is.
That's it. But he had a small hand size at the Senior Bowl. They practiced stretching his hand out, especially in the places where they measure and stuff like that. And I feel like guys are doing it. Like Forrest Lamp probably was, stretching his body out once a day on a rack or something because it matters. And, there's probably a little bit of, margin of error in the measurement. So you have two different people doing it at the Senior Bowl and at the Combine. But when it's an extreme difference, I feel like there was something worked on. Something that, they're practicing being taller and being longer. So, yeah. That's what the Combine's all about these days, is that preparation.
Well, you were mentioning how to cheat on a vertical jump. You hold back your shoulders to when you get measured. There is something to it because of how crazy it is with all these cutoffs. I mean, you can train those, your arm length just as much as you can train for the 40, which blows my mind. So let's get to those actual positional cutoffs. Teams have height cutoffs for cornerbacks, arm length cutoffs for offensive tackles, height cutoffs for defensive tackles. Excuse me, I don't know what just happened there.
Weight for linebackers sometimes.
Weight cutoffs
is different.
What are your thoughts on these? Would you have them? Would you actually take a guy off your board, a cornerback, if he was 5'9"? Would you just actually, not even looking at his tape, say, we don't want him because studies have shown those guys are less successful in the NFL?
I have no problem with tightening up the talent pool. Because there are hundreds and hundreds of prospects. And if it's almost like in the sake of time and dedication to the scouting process, you say, look, this 5'9" corner, we just can't look at 5'9" corners. We'll look at 5'10" or above. I can understand that to a point. If you have a hard cutoff of 6 feet tall, though, for corners, there's a lot of good corners at 5'10", 5'11". And most schemes, even your Seattle scheme that uses, loves the long corners, if they had Darrelle Revis for a few years, I'm pretty sure he'd be okay.
I don't know, Steve. His length, though, his arm length.
Yeah, he's not tall enough. So I think there's something to tightening up the talent pool, shrinking the talent pool to look at, but I don't think you want to do it too much. And it's fascinating watching, my old workout partner was Zach Diossi, the long snapper for the Giants, and he was coming into the draft in 2007 as a linebacker. And he was on the bigger side as a linebacker, and he was trying to be that the Giants type linebacker, the Patriots type linebacker. At the time, they liked 250-pound guys. That was their big cutoff. Different game back then. And he said he chugged as much water as he could the day of the weigh-in, and he went from 247 to 250, and he made their cutoff. And that's how ridiculous it is. And he got drafted by the Giants. And those cutoffs can be a little extreme, and the Giants are, still without good linebackers because they're probably in this, we need this big linebacker to play the run like it's 1986.
I also love how NFL coaches, love to bash analytics, love to hit on that stuff when that's textbook analytics.
Oh, absolutely.
That's basically saying
they're using numbers to dictate everything.
Yeah, we've seen that these cornerbacks don't work, these defensive tackles don't end up working out as well. And so we're going to, that's basically analytics at its, in a sort of more simplistic form, in a more kind of heuristic, what you've learned over the years, but it's still at its core analytics. So
it is. And look, I just think you shrink it a little bit. You cannot, completely eliminate players. So now Forrest Lamp is going to deal with this with the arm length and tackle. So here's my thing with Forrest Lamp. He's got 3 good years of tape at left tackle at Western Kentucky.
Yes.
He may end up being a guard. But why not at least try? You know how valuable a tackle is in this league. Why not at least try to make him a tackle? You're not going to hinder his guard development, or maybe push it aside a little bit, but just let him try a tackle. You need 64 good tackles in the NFL, and there's probably 30, 35 good tackles.
I feel like that's also the thing is why there's so few good tackles in the NFL is because no one wants to get this Pro Bowl level guard. No one wants to even give him a chance at left tackle.
So Brandon Sheriff, Zach Martin, now the team will dictate it.
Yes.
But the guys that have made this successful transition to guard, would you rather have a Pro Bowl guard or an average tackle or slightly above average tackle? We don't have data to back it up right now, but that's like probably an honest debate.
That's what I went to in the Kyle Long debate. I know he wanted to stay at guard there for the Bears. He didn't like playing tackle, but when he switched to right tackle, he was about an average right tackle, which
is extremely valuable.
Which
in
is
the NFL.
Probably salary-wise, he's probably going to make about the same as being a Pro Bowl guard.
True.
If you get to and that was 1 year after a switch. Next year down the road, he's probably going to be better off. They'll probably know the position a little bit better and go to above average tackle, and all of a sudden you're making $10+ million a year. I don't get everyone's obsession of moving people away from tackle. I feel like that's why we have so few good offensive tackles in the NFL.
So maybe the answer here is the NFL needs to think outside the box a little bit to find good tackles. And this goes back to my study a few years ago that the left tackle is just as important as the right tackle. Mm-hmm. And, teams being so one-sided and saying, we'll give $12 to $15 million to my left tackle and either just throw somebody else at right tackle that's not even that good or not invest as heavily there. This could be that way around it. You draft a Forrest Lamp and you say, we're gonna let you fail at tackle before we move you to guard. We might just be at practice failing at tackle where they say, well, okay, you can't do it. We're moving you to guard, but at least give them the chance.
And I feel like the thing even going a step further with this, you put Forrest Lamp at left tackle. He does, he turns into an above average left tackle. Let's just say that 4 years down the road when you're re-upping him, there's not going to be a huge market for him because everyone else still has these positional cutoffs. Hey,
true.
He's going to come here and not be a good left tackle.
We're the only team that gave him a shot.
Because he doesn't have the arm length, then all of a sudden, you can sign him for not as much. I just think it's crazy to me that teams continue to have those cutoffs on the offensive line when we've seen that they don't actually know 100% what still translates to a good tackle in the NFL.
We're changing the economics of the NFL here, Mike.
Honestly.
I'll tell you what, being here at the Combine this week, we've run into so many front office executives and guys that are just entrenched in scouting departments that listen to our stuff, by the way. We've got some fans around the NFL, believe it or not. I'm not name dropping. I'm not dropping any names. I'm just saying I was actually surprised at how many guys, we're just probably background noise at work, but guys that tune in to the podcast and, just try to pick up some tips here and there. So hello and thanks for listening, guys, all of our 2 or 3 fans that we ran into.
All right, so let's get into what's actually going to happen on the field in the Combine. And no one really cares about anything else but the 40. It's seemed like over the years. It really, the 40 doesn't matter. I've talked about this earlier in an article this week, how little the 40 matters to a bunch of positions in the NFL. But again, it's the number that everyone looks at no matter what. Everyone knows, like I said last week, that Jadeveon Clowney killed it in the 40-yard dash. No one knows what his 3-cone time was here at the Combine, even though that's probably the more important drill. So in the spirit of that, we're going to go through and predict some 40 times.
Just 40s.
Of some of the high-level position players at their respective positions. Some dichotomous players here. We're going to go right off the bat, the guy who I said might not have a great 40 time, and it's Mike Williams, the receiver out of Clemson. He could make himself some money if he runs better than expected here. What do you got him at, Steve?
Slow-ish.
Yeah.
4.6, 4.62.
I'll go higher than that. I think 4.65.
Really? That high?
I did not see not to say a single time last year, but I didn't see many times when he legitimately was separating, getting past a cornerback down the field and, moving past him. It's worrisome to me. It's in that regard, I think he could be a guy who goes to, we'll actually talk about him later in one of our segments, but I just don't trust him with a quarterback who's not going to give him chances. He can be a guy who just doesn't look open a lot, even though he is with the skills he has. So I think 4.65, I think he might slip down some boards with his performances.
Now, he was a legit 6'3", I believe. Shows up on tape, really uses his body well. On slants, post, I've called him an excellent possession receiver. This sounds a lot like Laquan Treadwell's scouting report. But
Okay, I was going to say. Keep
but
going.
the difference is Treadwell has a reputation for winning contested catches and winning at the catch point. Williams does it. Williams does win at the catch point, is an excellent red zone threat, can make downfield catches over cornerbacks. So even if he runs 4.6, I don't think I'm changing my evaluation on him at all because I already know him as a guy that doesn't separate very well, but I think can win on slants and posts, win on the short stuff, move the chains, and win down the field as a contested catch type of guy, which I don't think Treadwell truly has. I think he just flashed it, but he didn't do it often enough.
Again, that's what I was going to get back to. I was going to say the frequency of which both do it was night and day. It was basically Williams did it game after game after game. Treadwell would do it sometimes. So that's my difference between those two. The biggest difference between those two in my mind. All right, let's get to, since Corey Davis isn't running, which would be the other wide receiver counterpart for him, let's go to running backs. Dalvin Cook, I'm excited to see what he runs. We call him the best home run threat in this draft class. I'm going to say 4.44. I don't think he's going to blow the doors off.
Not 3.98. I had him at 3.98. I just think his speed is so special on the field. He has to be a sub 4.4 guy. And I get your point. We talked about this before the pod. He's big.
It's just hard benched, when you're that big.
He just benched 24, 25?
22, I think it was.
He's strong.
Yeah.
But the speed that shows up on the field is, I use the word angle changing every single time I describe it. So I just think he'll be, say, like a 4.38. I just think he's a sub 4.4 guy. He just looks like it on tape. And I hope that that's what we see.
Other running back who he's competing against to be the first one off the board, who we bet on a few weeks back, and you said Cook was going to be it, but I've seen a lot of mock drafts with Leonard Fournette as the first one off the board.
True.
What do you think he's going to run? I know he put up some ridiculous 100-meter times back in high school for his weight. He weighed in at 240, though.
That might change my prediction.
I know Derrick Henry went about, 4.5, something at 247 last year. Can Leonard Fournette come close to that? Can Leonard Fournette break 4.5?
I think Fournette's better straight line speed than Henry, isn't he?
I do agree.
So I guessed about 4.45 was my prediction. The 240 for Fournette, I don't think he played at 240.
Yeah. Well, he said he drank a lot of water, which...
Back to the water thing. That's a lot.
Yeah, which he was literally just chugging gallons of water before.
He's got to really worry about drowning himself.
Yeah,
that's risky.
He was dripping wet at the weigh-in. I don't know how he weighed in at 240, but at 240, I just can't see him breaking 4.5. That's just so heavy to me to break 4.5. I'll go 4.51.
And I'll also say this about Fournette. I think the reason why we don't like him that much is he doesn't have the shiftiness, the lateral quickness. I thought in 2015, his great year when he broke 83 tackles and led the nation, he showed a little bit more wiggle and he strung moves together pretty well. But his freshman year looked a little stiff and just straight line. In last year, stiff, straight line. So to me, it's like, I feel like he just needs to be in tip-top shape, maybe more than other guys. Maybe some Eddie Lacy type of, when he's in tip-top shape, he's really, really good. But, man, he's going to have to fight to maintain it. Maybe I think that's what the 240 is telling me here at the Combine.
It is worrisome. Let's move on to the guy who's going to be the number one overall draft pick in my opinion, and that's Myles Garrett. He looked ridiculous weighing in today at 272. Just a freak of nature. What do you have him running in the 40s, Steve?
The sculpted from granite, from marble, edge rusher, Myles Garrett.
He was created in a lab, the DE.
Yeah, that's how I described him a few weeks back in the piece. I think I'm going to say 4.49. He's just going to break the Combine.
He has... If he wasn't 272...
270, I know. The weight hurts it a little bit.
I still think he puts up a time that's going to be eye-popping for that weight, and I think it's something like 4.58.
That's reasonable.
In that range.
I may have gone a little extreme on the sub 4.5, but I'm expecting greatness from Myles Garrett.
All right, let's move on to his counterpart over the last 3 seasons in the SEC. The guy we're high on, Derek Barnett. He's not going to put up the 40 that Myles Garrett.
What was Bosa? Was Bosa a 4.85? Do I remember that correctly?
Something like that. It was something right around 4.8.
So I got Barnett right around 4.8, 4.79, 4.8. And the thing for me, I think Bosa Bosa's weight was really down last year, too.
4.86.
Yeah, and his weight was down.
Yeah.
269, Bosa, I think.
Yeah.
So Barnett's in like the 250, 259,
Yeah, 259, yeah.
9 range. So that's why I think he's very similar to Bosa as a guy that just wins often, and isn't going to wow with the 40 times. So I'm saying in that 4.8 range at about 259.
I'll go a little lower. I'll say 4.75.
Okay.
I think he just has a little more straight line-ish after the fact than Bosa did. Bosa's quick off the ball, but I don't think you watch him chasing down plays. He doesn't have that sort of, long speed, which we'll get to later.
Long speed, yes.
All right.
Scouting term.
On to one other defensive lineman who's going to go highly in this draft, and that's Jonathan Allen. I didn't see what he weighed in at this morning. I can look that up here, but
I threw my prediction in there anyway. He's probably around 285.
Okay.
I would say. And I said 485. I think that's a reasonable.
It was 291.
291.
You said 485.
485 at 291.
See, I don't see that sort of elite burst from him, I'll say.
You think he'll be a 5 guy?
I think he'll be just sub 5, just 498, something like that.
You might have a better feel for this than I do.
I don't quite have him getting that low. I just, like I said, he's 291, which is a little on the smaller side for a defensive tackle type prospect.
Right.
That's around where J.J. Watt was. I just think he just doesn't have the sort of burst that Watt did. So I'll go 498.
That's fair.
Be happy to be surprised on that one. Moving on to the guy who shocked the combine earlier today.
5'10".
Measuring in under 5'11" when he was listed at 6'1", Jabril Peppers. First off, what are they doing at Michigan? Like, there was a concentrated effort to get him into the Heisman conversation at Michigan with everything they did with him. Listing him at 6'1" when he is not even 5'11" is
giving him Wildcat snaps against Rutgers. They did everything they could to build up that Jabril height.
Incredible.
So 5'10" plus, just over 5'10", 213 pounds, safety type of numbers, running back type of numbers. That's where you like Jabril.
That really is like perfect running back size.
Before you predict Jabril Peppers, the most recent odds that we saw on his 40, he was minus 110, I believe, to be over 437. The over-under was set at 437.
Height machine's out of control.
Under was plus 100. And over was minus 110. I mean, I would be sprinting to put money on the minus 110, right? 437 feels extreme.
That's so extreme.
But when you put numbers on that, somebody must know something
to
do it. When you're putting Vegas type odds on it, I just think he's more of like a 4.4, 4.43. I don't think he's a 4.37 guy.
Yeah, I think mid 4.4s, 4.45 is about where I'd peg him at in this draft.
And a lot of people are going to be listening to this in hindsight and being like, man, you guys were way off.
No, they're going to be like,
Peppers was 4.31 or something like that.
An arbitrage opportunity there.
You did.
All right, move on to some of the other DBs in this draft class. The guy who might be the first defensive back off the board, and that's Marshawn Lattimore, the cornerback from Ohio State. What do you have him at, Steve?
So he plays the deep ball really well, but I feel like it's more of a technique thing than just a pure speed. I'd say just good speed, 4.48, 4.45.
I'll go lower than that.
You think he's really
he's
fast?
Like pure 4.4 guy.
Okay. And he's long. I didn't see he hasn't been measured yet, I don't think, or I haven't seen it, but
no, I haven't yet.
He's a 6 foot tall type of guy. I just think he plays the deep ball really well rather than maybe having that pure speed. He's got really good burst and acceleration. High 4.45, 4.48.
Okay. We should have been writing these down here, but we'll do it after the fact. Oh, you got it? Okay, good. All right.
Where are yours? You have to put yours in there. Just put them next to mine.
All right.
In our trusty Google Doc here.
Move on to Jamal Adams, a guy who I think is going to have real good
everything
cone. I just think like every single drill he'll be good. I'm not sure he has elite level speed, but I think every single drill he's going to be above average, trending toward elite level in his skills. What do you have Jamal Adams at?
4.51.
Ooh, you're higher than I am on it. I think he's a mid 4.4s guy. I'll go 4.44 again.
4.51.
4.5
for Jamal Adams. And I like Jamal. 5 point. Okay. There you go.
And now on to
next safety.
Yeah. The guy, Malik Hooker, elite range guy. What do you think he's going to run?
I think he'll be faster than Adams because we see all of those center field type plays that he makes from the far hash and all that stuff. 4.42, I think he's just got better long speed. than Jamal Adams. Malik Hooker, 4.42.
I'm going to go even lower. I think he has
Sub 4.4?
next year. I think he's going to go 4.38.
The next year, the Mac Hollins next year.
I think he has that sort of that juice in him that you just. That's why I think he's so high at safeties, because you just don't see safeties with that kind of speed and make those kind of plays that he does in college every day. So I think he could be a sub 4.4 guy.
That's fair. I mean, he makes incredible plays on the ball. I wouldn't be surprised.
Last one, the one who
You have to say his last name.
who's 40, I'm looking forward to the most. I'll be honest. Stevie Tuikolovatu, nose tackle
I like it. Nice job.
from USC. Thank you. 6'1", 350. What's he going to run, Steve?
I got him at 5.68.
Seems generous.
I have
I'll
him
be
in.
honest.
I have an. That's almost Eisen range.
Yeah. I'll go 5'7",
5.73. That's Josh Norris. That's what Norris ran, I think.
he struggles getting that weight up to speed. But yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to see what he does put up.
And maybe the best pure, can only stop the run on early downs player in this draft.
Not even
Doesn't move very well at all, but he is so stout at the point of attack. He destroys blockers. He's got a pretty good tackle radius. He's got good range to make plays, but he can't do much as a pass rusher because he's just not a great athlete. So 5.68, 5.75, probably reasonable guesses.
That actually transitions nicely into our scouting term of the week. We're going to move on to some segments here, which is long speed, which Stevie does not have. But
He does
some of
not
the
have
cornerbacks we mentioned do have. And Steve, talk to me about long speed.
I think it's just speed when you're running for a long time.
It is.
At a long distance.
All right, so long speed is...
What does it mean, Mike?
Long speed is... when they do the 40-yard dash, you give you the 10 time, the 20 time, and then the 40 time. Long speed is the difference between that 40 time and the 20 time. It's those last 20 yards of the 40-yard dash.
The flying 20 is what they call it, I think.
Is that a thing?
Flying 20.
Okay.
Because it's not your first 20. Your first 20 is, a build-up.
Yeah.
But you're already flying by the time you get to the 20.
Yes.
In between 20 and 40, it's that flying 20. It's
So-
the Mac Hollins, where Mac Hollins is going to excel.
It's what everyone talks about with cornerbacks. Some guys don't have it. I know the Texas A&M cornerback last year, whose name is now escaping my mind.
Devontae Harris.
Devontae Harris. I remember watching him on tape against Laquan Treadwell. There was a post route. He lost about a yard of separation on Laquan Treadwell on the post, and he just couldn't make it up.
Could not make it up.
Didn't have the speed to make it up, and that's what NFL defensive coordinators worry about. Guys not being able to make up ground if they lose it against receivers, because that's very important in the NFL. That gives up a lot of deep passes if you can't make up that ground. So
don't tell Sam that you trashed Devontae Harris here.
it was a bad play. That's probably why he went undrafted like he did. It's because...
I believe it. But the short area, Harris was so good
exactly,
at the short area stuff, playing off coverage and just closing on the ball. Harris was one of the best in the entire class last year.
But for some reason, there are good reasons, but NFL basically requires long speed at cornerback. We see guys like Richard Sherman, Josh Norman get underdrafted because they don't have, quote unquote, that long speed. But there is something to it. It is important to the NFL, but yeah, I think it gets overhyped at times.
Let me bring up something that we talked about the other day. Mm-hmm. We always talk about receivers winning at the catch point, right? And we said we just gave an excuse for Mike Williams earlier today. We said he's a 4.6 guy, maybe 4.55 guy, but it's okay. He wins at the catch point. He could still be a deep threat. Mm-hmm. Do we do the reverse for corners and not even look at the fact that, or not even look at whether or not a guy's good at catching at the catch point on the deep ball as a corner? Do we just assume it's speed? Well, if you run 4.4, you can defend the deep ball. If you run 4.6, you can't. Sherman's a 4.6 guy, but you're not throwing deep on him. Yeah. He is unbelievable at the catch point on the deep ball. How much should that factor in?
That's my whole thing about Jordan Lewis in this draft. He doesn't have that long speed, but at the catch point, he is better than any cornerback I've seen in this draft. He makes more plays on the ball. When he is, maybe loses a step deep, it basically requires a perfect throw against him, perfectly in-stride throw, or else he's breaking that ball up because he's going to, rake the arms at the perfect time to get you to not catch that pass, which I think has more value than this super fast cornerback who, maybe the ball gets underthrown and just runs right into the wide receiver, PI.
It's all about giving up the play or not. It's all about, did you win or lose?
Yes.
And, these are tools that might make it easier to win or lose, but at some point, It's the how often. How often did you win or lose? We keep coming back to it.
How often? That's the theme of the week. So long speed, you guys know it. Now on to our made-up scouting term of the week, which last week we saw a few of you guys' tweets about tackle radius. Frankie's killing it on Twitter. Everyone else, feel free to join in. This one I came up with, and I think it's a good one. It's one-cut running backs are Ginsu knives because.
By the way, your mom's also killing it with
Oh yeah, she is
hashtags.
too. Shout out, Mom. Stop tweeting so much though.
Avid listener.
Avid listener.
Mike's mom.
Ginsu knives, one-cut running backs. It's. I mean,
The Ginsu knife.
The Ginsu knife. That's the Jordan Howards, the Ezekiel Elliott's, the one-cutters.
The Ginsu knife.
Yeah.
Who's the best Ginsu knife in this draft?
Ooh, the best one in this draft so far.
McCaffrey?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
I did.
One
Is
cut
it
guy?
I mean, is it Dalvin?
It's not Dalvin. Dalvin's got a little more. I can get on board with McCaffrey being the best one cut.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot there. McCaffrey's interesting because he didn't do a lot of one-cut scheme type of stuff. It was a lot of power scheme at Stanford, and he's actually so good at setting up his blocks in that gap power scheme.
Yeah.
But McCaffrey can also run outside zone, inside zone extremely well because he is so quick.
He's a Ginsu knife.
We'll get back to the best Ginsu knife next week. We'll let you study up a little bit more, looking for a Ginsu knife. And don't forget, guys, use hashtag Ginsu knife when your favorite NFL draft analyst is breaking down running backs. Just be like, hey, is that a hashtag Ginsu knife?
I feel like Daniel Jeremiah would enjoy that term.
I think he liked it. We might need to start explaining the term so they know what's being thrown their way. Maybe throw some at Josh Norris, too. He's a big fan of made-up terms. He was actually excited about this segment when we talked about it. He was impressed that this is something we're doing. So
revolutionize the game, guys. All right. On to risers and fallers, guys we've seen recently who have risen or fallen in our mind. And I'll talk about the receivers this week. I watched a good deal of Corey Davis and Mike Williams back-to-back. Corey Davis came out unequivocally on top for me, the Western Michigan receiver. I know he wasn't playing, same caliber of cornerbacks, but his route running is impeccable already. He has that sort of, uncoachable sort of creativity at the top of his routes that
I like that.
It's just he has body control too. Every time he got jammed or was trying to get jammed by linebackers, cornerbacks, whatever, he swam over it. He's perfect getting his defensive backs' hands off him. I'm a big fan. He's not going to have top-tier athletic numbers similar to Williams, but I just think he adds more in terms of after the catch and ability to get open at the intermediate range that Williams just doesn't have as good as Davis. So Davis is my riser, Williams my faller to some degree just because they kind of separate in my mind. And Williams, like I said earlier, he could go to a team like the Rams. He could go to a team with a bad quarterback.
Whoa.
Sorry, okay, I didn't mean to go there.
The Rams do not have a bad.
You go to a team like the Jets. You go to someone with a bad quarterback who you're going to have to give him chances because he's not always going to look open to make plays. You kind of have to throw him open at times because give him a chance on a 50-50 ball, it's going to be more of like a 75-20 ball for him because of how good he is at the catch point.
Play with the Ravens and Joe Flacco, he'll certainly succeed.
Yes, but you just have to have a quarterback who's willing to give him chances because he's not always going to have this, eye-catching separation.
That was my complaint about Laquan Treadwell last year going to Minnesota.
Yes.
Teddy Bridgewater's not a guy that takes a ton of chances into tight coverage. Treadwell was not a guy that separates very well on most routes. So I didn't think it was going to be a marriage. Now, we didn't get to see
and it's kind of a scheme
either player this year. Bridgewater played almost as many snaps as Treadwell this season, playing 0.
Yes.
But that was one of my examples. I think Williams, if he goes to a Ravens scheme, would be great. Now, what if he's playing with Marcus Mariota, who I think he's more of a, he's not a guy that's going to take a ton of chances and give his guys opportunities to make 50-50 type catches. So I think scheme's going to be big for Williams.
He basically needs Ryan Fitzpatrick to succeed.
Oh, Fitzpatrick would be good if he could get a job. My turn?
Yes.
Risers and fallers?
Receiver turn.
All right, let's go. David Njoku, Miami tight end. The more you watch him, our guy Billy Moyes doing a lot of our tight end profiles made the Jordan Reed comparison, which I don't think is crazy. Move tight end.
I disagree.
Good after the catch. Why is that?
I just don't see it.
What don't you see in Njoku?
Reed has such high level after the catch ability. Reed looks like a running back after the catch.
I get it.
Njoku,
like Aaron Hernandez, but Njoku averaged 11 yards after the catch per reception. 11.
Yeah.
And I know it's just a stat, but I think
Njoku's more like Martellus Bennett after the catch than in the way he wins after the catch than Jordan Reed.
In the way they win, but I think it's more about the fact that they will win.
Yeah. Oh, no.
Right. And when you make comparisons, it's why are you comparing that guy? I'm not telling you that Njoku has running back type skills like Jordan Reed, who's a former option running quarterback.
Yeah.
And Njoku is like Jordan Reed because he's a guy that's going to move. He's going to be the move tight end more than an inline tight end because he's not a great blocker. He can play in the slot. He can be the inside slot guy that you isolate on a linebacker. He can be the guy you put outside and isolate him as the X receiver on a linebacker or a safety. I think he has the ball skills to win, and he runs like a wide receiver. I think he's going to show that this weekend at the Combine.
All right.
That's why he's rising, and I think he's going to get a lot of first round hype coming out.
I like him as a tight end. Not first round though, but keep going.
My faller, everybody's talking me into Leonard Fournette, and it's not.
I convinced you.
Here's where I am with Fournette. As a freshman, statistically he was really good as a freshman.
Yes.
But I remember looking at him thinking, this just isn't, he's not a great running back. He just looked like he was a man.
So yeah, that's the thing. It's like it seems different when it seems out of place in terms of the way he's winning. Sometimes it's like that isn't replicatable.
Well, that's what I mean. Yeah. He just looked like he was a man among boys as a freshman in the SEC, right? So he just came in and he was just this well-developed kid that just off pure power and straight line speed got it done. Now, 2015 convinced me otherwise. He added more wiggle to his game, as I said earlier, so I do think peak Fournette is really good. But then last year, 2016, some injuries, and now this whole water weight, 240 pounds, that scares me a little bit because I do feel like it's going to be one of those things. If he's at his optimum weight and mental capacity and health, he's a good player, very good player. But I wonder if there's just going to be a lot of fluctuation to his play. And then, of course, there's those Alabama games when he had no room to run. And do you have stats on those, Mike?
I do have stats on
these
those.
Things. When he has no room to run and he has poor blocking, Fournette is just not the same player. And you wrote about this week. Check out the PFF Draft Daily, guys. If you're not reading it daily, we got a lot of good nuggets in there.
So when he had below average run blocking in a game in front of him, he averaged 4.6 yards per carry. When it was above average, that was 8.7 yards per carry.
So 8.7 with good blocking.
With good blocking.
4.6
with bad blocking.
With bad blocking. And 4.6 isn't bad, but in the
Dalvin Cooks was 5.9.
Okay, so that's the comparison. And in college, 4.6 is nothing special.
Yeah, 4.6 is not good.
And what was Cook with good blocking?
It was something like 7.5.
So when Fournette did not have room to run, did not have the best run blocking, and this was just on a game by game scale, you did this, right? And that's a factor.
Behind good run blocking, and he'll look very good, and he could be, a dominant guy. But so few teams have great run blocking in the NFL, and all of a sudden you draft a guy in the first round because you think he'll overcome your offensive line to some degree, or else you start drafting offensive line first. So I
think Dalvin can overcome.
A
bad line, yeah. And you don't think Fournette can?
I just don't think he can.
So you wouldn't draft Fournette in the first round?
No.
Do we have a hot take alert?
Oh yeah, that's a hot take alert. Based on both your riser and your faller, hot take come in, and this has to do with what I just mentioned there, the positional value of a running back, not being able to overcome an offensive line, and what you mentioned with Njoku as a tight end. I wouldn't take a running back or a tight end in the first round ever if I was a GM in the NFL.
I don't know why you're lumping both of these into the same conversation.
The positional value of each is so low that I'm not taking either in the first round.
I mean, I don't mind the running back take here. I don't think you're wrong. I mean, the Jordan Howard in the 5th versus Ezekiel Elliott in the 1st. What if Dallas got Jalen Ramsey and then Jordan Howard later in the draft? That type of thing. I mean, that's fair. I disagree on the tight end thing. I think tight ends are game changers. The best tight ends are game changers.
They're so team and scheme specific, though. So few teams use their tight ends in a meaningful manner.
Because there's so few tight ends that are game changers. And if you can find one, you take him and you build your offense around him.
Okay.
I think so. Gronkowski's an extreme example because he's maybe the best of all time.
Well, and he wasn't a first rounder.
I know he wasn't because he had back injuries.
All right.
But if you knew that you were getting Gronk and you could take him in the first round, you would take him in the first round. He'd be a top 5 pick.
Okay.
Jordan Reed, I think, is a first round.
Wasn't a first rounder, though.
I know he wasn't a first rounder, But we're talking about, can you find the guy to put up those that has those skills to use to change your offense from a schematic standpoint, from a matchup standpoint. Well, Greg Olson was a first rounder. I think that's a viable pick. I think those guys just create so many mismatch problems. I think so many of the top offenses, Tyler Eifert with Cincinnati when he's healthy, so many of the top offenses when they have a good tight end, there's correlation there. There's a reason.
I just disagree.
I'm okay with tight ends. Running backs,
I just wouldn't take a tight end. I just don't think they are.
It's another lukewarm take because you lumped tight ends in there.
I think my other thing is you can find good tight ends later in the draft that just all the names I mentioned, Jimmy Graham, also Travis Kelce, you can find guys later in the draft. I just wouldn't go.
It's because teams are stupid and they should have spent first rounds on them, round picks on them.
I just don't think I'm just talking about positional value. It's not going to change my offense in a dramatic way that I'm going to.
It's going to change your offense in a dramatic way if you have.
And my other take on tight ends, which I'm just going to add on top of this because I'm burned on the tight ends right now. If a tight end runs above a 4.75, I'm not taking him ever.
Michael Roberts from Toledo, is that what you're expecting from him?
Athleticism matters as much at tight end, if not more, than at wide receiver, because the biggest thing for a tight end is being able to outrun a linebacker up the seam. Like that is.
Well, they can outrun Scooby Wright.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but I'm saying.
Poor Scoobs.
Slow tight ends have they don't do it for me whatsoever. And I think it's
so much tight end hate here.
I think it's borne out in the NFL to some degree.
So much tight end hate here. They don't need to. It's like the Anquan Bolden deal. They don't need to separate. Mike Williams, they don't need to separate if they have the long catch radius and they have the quarterback willing to give them a chance to make a play on the ball. I don't like your tight end hate. I think tight ends are game changers. But your point about finding them later in the draft, you're right. I mean, historically, we've seen that for the Kelceys, the Grahams, and Jordan Reeds. Fine. But I love tight ends.
All right. Never in the first, though. All right. Old scouting reports now. We'll read some of our hits and misses from past drafts. And we're going to go to two that actually
aren't that old,
and we're not sure if they're hits or misses to this up till now. We'll go with the quarterbacks from last year, since everyone's talking about the quarterbacks this year. Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, right at the top of the draft. We'll break it off with Jared Goff. Here's a few of the things we said about him. Makes incredible throws with defenders bearing down on him. Fearless in the pocket. Pocket presence. Moves in the pocket to find passing lanes. Keeps his eyes up while maneuvering the pocket. Processes information quickly. Zips through progressions. Always keeping body in position to throw. Will get to the second and third reads on the backside of the field and can make accurate throws late in the progression.
These are my words here.
These are yours. And those are good words. But let's move on to the words that were concerning about Jared Goff. Short area ball location is not ideal, even on completions. Is that still a little worrisome?
Oh, yeah. Still very worrisome. Yeah.
May move around in the pocket too much, sometimes compromising the leverage of the offensive line.
He's a lefty drifter.
Saw that a number of times.
He drifts left.
It's like not the way to go.
It's like the playing the computer in Madden. The quarterback always drifts, usually to the right, I think it used to be. He's a drift to the left guy.
Yeah.
And you lose leverage at the offensive line. That's why he took a couple extra hits.
Yeah, not good. Misdiagnosed cover 2 on multiple occasions. Is either fooled pre-snap or predetermining his read without adjustment. I think we saw that a good bit.
We did see that a little bit, yeah.
And then was more careless with the ball in his final season, had too many turnover-worthy plays, has enough arm but not a cannon, may leave some plays on the field that can't be zipped in. Arm strength wanes when forced to reset his feet in the pocket.
So that's one of those issues I think came up more this year.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, you're reading the scouting report, these are things that happen, and now I'm going to tell you that one is one I think that happened more often, back to the more often, as a rookie. When he needed to reset, when he needed to get from 1 to 2 to 3, he just wasn't driving the ball, I think part of it was confidence and not understanding the system. I think it still all comes down to the fact that the positives that came out of this came from his mastery of that air raid, bear raid system, right? He was so entrenched in the system, which was simple. It's a simple system, but he did it really well. Flew through his reads and all that stuff. He never mastered the Ram system, which was not a good system. It was a bad system.
Even if he would have mastered it.
It was a bad system with bad offensive line and bad playmakers. So I'm still not giving up hope on Jared Goff, but the reason why he looked so bad this year was in part because he did not master the system. His surrounding pieces were not good. And some of the positives there, I thought we saw a lot more of. The negative. We saw a lot more,
Yes.
higher percentage of those negatives from that scouting report.
Good scouting report, though, Steve. It was
Thanks. A lot of detail.
Yes.
And stuff in there. The short area the short area accuracy, though, was concerning. And I always had this, like, inner voice saying, you're pushing for Jared Goff. You're saying he's one of the top quarterbacks, but what's his ceiling really going to be? And I still struggle with that because I know a lot of people compared him to Matt Ryan, and even before last year, I would still struggle to see him getting to that Matt
point.
Ryan. And not Matt Ryan, the MVP. This was Matt Ryan going into last year, which was, top 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 quarterback Matt Ryan. Still struggle maybe to see Goff get into that level.
I'm with you. All right, on to Carson Wentz, who we were also high on. These were our number 1 and number 2 quarterbacks on our board. What he does best: arm stands out, throws with great velocity, can fire the ball in there on deep outs and deep comebacks, made far hash throws look easy at the college level, did a nice job finding the open man and moving the chains in the 1 to 10 yard range, even if his timing was less than ideal at times. Did a nice job as a designed runner and as a scrambler in college, can pick up yards on the ground, but not sure how much his future team will want him to do that at the next level. Throws with anticipation on first 3 throws, can zip the curl route before the wide receivers break. Shows touch, but it's often a much slower throwing motion, and his accuracy is hit and miss. Biggest concerns now: slow to process in the passing game, will be late on short and intermediate throws, but arm strength bails him out. Will this still work at the next level? Rarely got to a third read in his progression, even when running common staple passing concepts. Their boot play had 3 options, and Wentz would regularly miss the open third receiver. Inexperienced, much of Wentz's lure is the physical size and arm. Will he progress, though? Accuracy at the 21 to 30 yard range was well below average. His adjusted completion percentage of 43.5% ranked 23rd in the draft class. For a big arm quarterback, he has to take advantage of throws in this range.
What do you think, Mike?
I think that was fairly good. I think we saw him overthrow a lot in that 21 to 30 yard range. A lot of posts that he just whiffed on.
Right.
A lot of forced throws over the middle of the field. He was a little more ready than I even thought.
I agree there.
Inexperience did not show nearly as much. I mean, it was just there wasn't like one big glaring, there weren't these huge glaring issues like Jared Goff. There was just a handful of issues that, came to light at certain times during the season.
For those of you that listen to the Quarterback Podcast as avid weekly listeners, and I suggest you go download that as well, the PFF QB podcast with myself and Zach Robinson, we went back and watched Wentz, I think it was week 5 or so, against Minnesota. And up until that point, in our system, he was grading well. He was off to a really good start. I think everybody was impressed with early season Wentz. But that Minnesota game, and Minnesota's defense early in the season was outstanding. They had everybody looking bad.
Yeah.
But it felt like every negative in that scouting report came out again. Accuracy at the short level, late, being late, not getting through reads, doesn't maneuver the pocket that well, even though he got better at it last year. I feel like every negative in that scouting report came out again. So I think a lot of the report is valid. I think much of it came down to, against poor competition, I think he did a better job. He was certainly more comfortable than I expected, like you said. That stood out. His comfort early in the season was great. But I don't know that he uses the big arm yet. That's my thing. I envisioned him as a guy that would be like 8 yards per attempt guy with a lower completion percentage, right? 8 yards per attempt at his peak, where it's big chunk plays, and maybe he misses some shorter stuff.
Some of that had to do with Doug Peterson's offense.
And the receivers aren't great.
And the receivers.
The receivers are not good at all. But
not great being very kind. They're off.
but I think at his peak that he's more of that, should be more of that drive the ball down the field guy, throw the, zip the seam in there. He shows enough touch, even though it's inconsistent, that type of thing. And, this was a lot closer to a dink and dunk, type of feel for Wentz. And ultimately, I think that needs to improve. That's where he needs to be able to drive the ball down the field a little bit more. Throw those deep outs and comebacks that he threw really well in college.
100% agree. All right, on to handicapping the draft. Last segment. Steve's going to place a bet. I hope he's going to take some of these odds for...
Do I have to place a bet?
You don't have to. That's what I'm saying. I hope. he has already laid down $250 on this draft. We'll go through. He put $100 on Mitch Trubisky being the first quarterback off the board at minus 150.
I have a lot of money on this here.
Yeah, $50 on Dalvin being the first running back off the board at minus 110. $100 on the first kicker coming off the board on day 2.
That was stupid.
With plus 300 odds, which I'm just like, I'm counting that in my bank account already. As,
I was diversifying funds here. I had a couple, the Trubisky one I felt good about.
Yeah.
Cook one I feel good about.
So then
I was diversifying, a little high risk.
Yeah, high risk. I got you. And now we'll be asking Steve, who's the first tight end to come off the board? Is it O.J. Howard at minus 130 or David Njoku at plus 100?
This week's riser that we already discussed.
The riser.
So as much as I think Njoku's going to come out of the combine here with a lot of hype and top 20, top 25 type hype, I'm going to go Howard. I'm going to play it safe again after last week's high-risk kicker bet, Gordon. O.J. Howard, minus 130. We'll just go another $50 on him at minus 130. Better blocker, better all-around presence. Even if Njoku runs better, I think somebody's going to look at Howard as this more all-around total package at tight end that can block, that has the catch radius, that can stretch the seam, that wasn't used enough in the passing game in Alabama. That will be a better pro than he was in college. So I think people are going to bank on Howard as the top tight end.
See, I think it's going to be Njoku at this point.
We'll throw some money down, man.
I can't throw money down. I place in the odds. I'm the odds maker.
Yeah, that's conflict of interest, I think. But
I mean, who's going to pay myself?
But hey, that's what you believe. That's fine. Make a note of it at least, so we can come back and take a look.
All right, that is it for us today. Feel free to follow us on Twitter. I'm PFF_Mike. He's PFF_Steve. Get out there and ask some analysts about Ginsu knives. See what they got to say about it.
Get the hashtag Ginsu knife out there. Like the podcast. That's pretty important.
And rate us on iTunes. And
don't forget about Draft Pass, Mike.
And don't forget about Draft Pass. Yeah, Draft Pass has officially arrived. Steve, tell them a little bit about the Draft Pass.
Yeah, so Draft Pass, it's our new way of giving the fans our signature stats and new stats, advanced stats on players online. We've never done this before. Last year we had a draft guide that was in PDF form. If you sign up for Draft Pass, you will get the draft guide again, the PDF, but you'll also get the online component right now. We'll get you a little login, and you can get all of our signature stats, QBs under pressure, wide receiver deep ball numbers, cornerback coverage numbers, all sorts of great stuff, pass rush productivity. All of that is rolled into this one Draft Pass. So you have the online component, you'll get the PDFs. We'll be updating that a few times leading up to the draft. So it's really cool. Go check it out. profootballfocus.com/draftpass17. If you need any more help, hit me up on Twitter at PFF_Steve. I'll give you all the information you need.
And that's it for us. You guys have a good week. We'll see you again next week.